Hi guys, welcome to the 13th podcast of Let's Revise MBBS Cardiology, and today we'll be starting with ECG and arrhythmias. I know it'll be difficult to cover entire ECG just by the podcast without any images, but we will try to cover maximum points, and then you can even see those ECG after the podcast. See the images of particular ECG which we discuss after listening to the podcast. Okay, we'll try to keep it very simple. We will go step by step. Okay, and we will do arrhythmia and ECG simultaneously. So ECG, we basically use ECG to diagnose tachyarrhythmias, bradyarrhythmias, or to localize MIs, and for some other miscellaneous things. So now there are 6 things which we should look at ECG step by step. So the first thing which we should look on ECG is the QRS complex. Okay, so QRS complex can either be narrow QRS complex or wide QRS complex. If the width of the QRS complex is more than 120 milliseconds or 3 small boxes, then it is called as wide QRS complex, and if it is less than 120 milliseconds, then it is narrow QRS complex. Normally it is around 100 milliseconds. Okay, so this QRS complex represents ventricular depolarization. So there are 3 phases of ventricular depolarization. First, the septum is depolarized, and this septum is depolarized from left to right side. Okay, from left to right side. So now, as you all know, V1, V2, these leads are right side leads, and V5, V6 is towards the left side. Okay, so if the septal depolarization is happening from left to right, there should be a positive deflection in right sided leads, that is V1 and V2, and there should be a negative deflection in V5 and V6. So this negative wave in V5, V6 is known as Q wave, and the positive wave in V1 and V2 is known as R wave. Okay, but these are very small deflections because the septum is very thin as compared to ventricular myocardium. Okay, so second phase in QRS complex is ventricular myocardium depolarization. So this depolarization occurs from the impulse starts from SA node, then goes to AV node, then to the bundle of His, and then through the right bundle and left bundle branches through the Purkinje fiber, it goes into the ventricles. Okay, and this the manner in which the ventricle depolarizes is from endocardium to myocardium to the epicardium. Okay, so now the major bulk of the ventricle is the left ventricle. So this the wave will be prominent towards the left side. So there will be positive deflection in left sided leads V5 and V6, and negative deflection in V1. Okay, and the third part of QRS complex is because of depolarization of posterobasal area. Okay, so this is again opposite to the direction of the second part. So that's why we can get a negative deflection in V5 and V6. So now if we see narrow QRS complex, that means the impulse which is coming from atria to the ventricle is following the normal pathway. That is, it is going from AV node to bundle of His, to bundle branches, and then to the Purkinje fibers. Because the speed of conduction of these fibers is very high, that's why we get a narrow QRS complex. If we see wide QRS complex, then that means ventricular depolarization is not happening through the Purkinje system. Okay, so we can get wide QRS complex in cases like ventricular tachycardias, where the impulse is generated in ventricle itself, or we can see in bundle branch blocks like LBBB, RBBB. This is the only exception where the impulse is coming from the AV node, from the normal pathway, but there is block in the pathway. Okay, and other condition where we can see is in the WBW syndrome or AVRT, a particular type of AVRT, which we will talk about in the next podcast. Okay, so this was the first thing. You look at QRS complex. Now second thing which we look in the ECG is whether every QRS complex is preceded by P wave or not. Okay, and if there is P wave preceding QRS complex, then we even see the PR interval. PR interval includes the P wave as well as PR segment. Okay. So what does PR interval denote? It denotes activation of atria, then the impulse going from atria to AV node, then to the bundle of His. Yeah, so this all the process is included in the PR segment, PR interval. Okay, so normal PR interval is 3 to 5 small boxes, that is around 120 to 200 milliseconds. If it is less than 120 milliseconds, then it is short PR interval, and more than 200 milliseconds is prolonged PR interval. So short PR interval can be seen when there is no AV nodal delay. Normally this PR interval is long, or there is some PR interval because of AV nodal delay. But if the impulse goes to the ventricle through an aberrant pathway, not through the normal pathway, then we can get a short PR interval. Okay, and prolonged PR interval can be seen in blocks like first degree, second degree, third degree heart blocks. Right. Now if the impulse is originating supraventricularly, it can originate from SA node or directly from the atrium or from the AV node. Okay, so how will we differentiate between these three? So first, if we see normal morphology P wave, then that means the impulse has originated from the SA node. Okay, if the morphology of the P wave is abnormal, then that means it is from the atria. And if it is from AV node, P wave will not be seen. Okay, so that's how we can differentiate between the three areas. Right, now the third thing which we look at in the ECG is RR interval. Is it regular or irregular? Okay, fourth thing is calculate the rate. How do you calculate the rate? The accurate method can be you do 1500 divided by number of small boxes between two R waves. Okay, so if in between two R waves there are 20 small boxes, then the heart rate will be 1500 by 20, which is 75. Okay, so this was the fourth thing. Fifth thing to which we should look at is the axis of ECG. Okay, so normal axis of ECG is between 0 and 90 degrees, or some people say from minus 30 degrees to 90 degrees. So for calculating the axis, we should mainly see at two leads, lead 1 and lead AVF. So lead 1 is at 0 degrees and lead AVF is at 90 degrees. So if the axis of the heart is between 0 and 90, there will be positive deflection in both lead 1 as well as AVF. Okay, if lead 1 is negative and AVF is positive, that means the axis of the heart is beyond 90 degree. That means the heart is deviated to the right side. So it becomes right axis deviation. If the AVF is positive and lead 1 is negative, then it is right axis deviation. If the heart goes to the left side, then AVF will be negative and lead 1 will be positive. So in left sided deviation, lead 1 will be positive and AVF will be negative. Okay, so that's how you can calculate the axis of the heart. And the next thing, the sixth thing which we look at in the ECG is the QT interval. So this QT interval include ventricular depolarization plus ventricular repolarization. Okay, so entire ventricular activity is represented by this QT interval. QT interval starts from the beginning of QRS to the end of T. Okay, so it includes entire ventricular activity. Normal QT interval is between 0.4 to 0.42 seconds, that is 10 to 11 small boxes. Okay, and if it is more than this, more than 12, then we call it as prolonged QT interval. So prolongation of QT interval is mainly because of prolongation of ventricular repolarization time. So we saw 6 basic things which we should see on ECG. First, see morphology of QRS complex, narrow or wide. Second, see whether every QRS complex is preceded by P wave, and also take a look at PR interval. Then third thing is look at regularity. Okay, distance between every RR interval. Fourth thing is look at the rate, calculate the rate. Fifth thing is calculate the axis, and sixth thing is to calculate the QT interval. Okay. So now we will start with narrow QRS complex tachycardia. So we'll cover all those tachycardias in which we see narrow QRS complex. So which all tachycardias are included here? The first is sinus tachycardia. Then we can have focal atrial tachycardia. We can have multifocal atrial tachycardia. We can have junctional tachycardia. Then we can have re-entry tachycardia. In re-entry tachycardia, we mainly have AVRT and AVNRT. AVNRT is AV nodal re-entry tachycardia and AVRT is atrioventricular re-entry tachycardia. Then we have atrial flutter and atrial fibrillation. Okay, so we are going to cover all these tachycardias. So mechanism for this tachycardia there are mainly two mechanisms, or rather we can say three mechanisms. The first one is re-entry, second one is enhanced automaticity, and third one is after depolarization. But the first two are more important. So in re-entry, the problem is in conduction, not in initiation. So we only require one single premature perfectly timed atrial impulse. Okay, so example of re-entry tachycardia is AVNRT. So in AVNRT, what happens is there are two pathways for conduction of atrial impulse. One is the slow pathway and other one is fast pathway. Okay, the refractory period of slow pathway is shorter and the refractory period of fast pathway is longer. So if the impulse is perfectly timed, then it can pass through the slow pathway, and at that time, it can pass through the slow pathway, and at that time the fast pathway, if it is in refractory period, then the impulse can go down and it can also re-enter the circuit. So we'll talk about AVNRT in detail in the further podcast, but the basic principle or basic mechanism of AVNRT is re-entry tachycardia. So because it is re-entry tachycardia and because there is problem in conduction, we can use vagal maneuvers or drugs blocking the AV node for treatment. Okay, because this is problem in conduction. In the second case, in the second mechanism, which is enhanced automaticity, the automaticity is increased. So in this case, we cannot use vagal maneuvers or drugs which block AV node to control tachycardias because there is no problem in conduction. The problem is in initiation. Okay. And the third mechanism, which is after depolarization, is the predominant mechanism of arrhythmia due to digoxin toxicity. Okay. So now, see, first we see QRS complex. That QRS complex is narrow. So we look at RR interval, regular or irregular. If the RR interval is regular, then what all possibilities we have? We have AVNRT, AVRT, junctional tachycardias, sinus tachycardia. Then we have focal atrial tachycardias and atrial flutter. So 6 things. These 6 possibility we have. Okay, in regular RR interval narrow QRS complex. If it is irregular RR interval, then we mainly have only 2 possibilities, that is atrial fibrillation and multifocal atrial tachycardia. Okay, so most common type of supraventricular tachycardia is it is sinus tachycardia because that is physiological. But if you are asked most common type of supraventricular tachycardia due to re-entry, okay, then it is AVNRT. So let's talk about AVNRT. So AVNRT is AV nodal re-entry tachycardia. It is mostly seen in structurally normal heart and it is more common in females. Okay, heart rate in AVNRT is approximately 180 to 250. Okay, so it is most probably more than 200. If you find the heart rate less than 200 or less than 150, and if you are diagnosing it as AVNRT, you should think twice. Okay, so now let's see the mechanism. So now as I said, there is a perfectly timed premature atrial complex or premature atrial impulse which comes to the AV node. Now there are 2 pathways, slow pathway and fast pathway. The slow pathway has a shorter refractory period and the fast pathway has a longer refractory period. Now the impulse has arrived at the junction and that impulse sees that the fast pathway is in refractory period, but the slow pathway is out of refractory period. So it goes through the slow pathway. Okay, and as it goes through the slow pathway, and when it again reaches the fast pathway through the other end, till that time the fast pathway, the refractory period has ended of the fast pathway. So now it has a chance, and it can go up, or retrogradely it can go through the fast pathway. So anterogradely it is coming through slow pathway, and retrogradely it is going through the fast pathway. Okay, so this is how re-entry is occurring. But for this there should be a perfect timing. At that time the fast pathway should be in refractory period and slow pathway should be out of refractory period, and when that impulse reaches the other end, at that time the fast pathway should come out of the refractory period. So if this can happen, only then a re-entry circuit can be formed or can be started. Okay, so now in AV-NRT, since atria and ventricle are getting depolarized almost simultaneously, on the ECG we can find P wave which is buried inside the QRS complex. Okay, or sometimes we can see P wave slightly after QRS complex. Okay, but the difference will be very less. Most of the time we cannot differentiate P wave from the QRS complex, but if we can, then most probably the P wave will be after QRS complex. Okay, right. Now how do we treat AV-NRT? So since we have discussed that this AV-NRT is a re-entry phenomenon and there is problem in conduction, so basic things like vagal maneuver, carotid sinus massage and Valsalva maneuver, this can help in controlling the AV-NRT or stopping the AV-NRT, because even if there is slight blockage or slight delay through conduction from one circuit, everything will be disrupted and again the normal pattern will be restarted. But if the patient comes in emergency to the hospital, we don't prefer to perform these maneuvers. We directly go for the drug of choice, and the drug of choice is adenosine. Okay, so this adenosine acts by inhibiting or decreasing or blocking the conduction across the AV node. But the problem with adenosine is that, or that's not only problem, that's also advantage of adenosine, that its half-life is only 10 seconds. Okay, so we need to give it in a very fast way, like we give it by saline flush method. So we put a 3-way cannula, and from one cannula we give adenosine, and immediately from the other cannula we push the saline. Okay, so now we give 6 milligram IV adenosine, and most of the cases will be reverted back to the normal rhythm. If it does not, we can give second try of 12 mg adenosine, and if it still does not respond, we can try once more with 12 milligram of adenosine. So in total we can give 30 milligram of adenosine. Okay, and by the end of this, most of the patient respond. But in case very few, there are some cases which do not respond to adenosine, then we can go for calcium channel blocker or beta blocker. Okay, verapamil is preferred in calcium channel blocker, and beta blockers we prefer metoprolol. Okay, now if the patient has any type of arrhythmia, remember this, if there is any type of arrhythmia and the patient is hemodynamically unstable, we directly go for electric DC cardioversion. Okay, but in AV-NRT most of the time the patient is hemodynamically stable, so we go with this protocol. First adenosine, 3 trial we give with adenosine, then not responding we give calcium channel blockers or beta blockers. Okay, and most of the patient will resolve or will revert back. Now that was about AV-NRT. Let's talk about WPW syndrome. So WPW syndrome is Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, and here there is another pathway which is aberrant pathway, which is known as bundle of Kent, which connects atria to the ventricle, but this connection is not from the regular pathway. This is a different connection. Okay, so we have 2 types or 2 varieties of WPW syndrome, which is, one is concealed variety and another is manifest. So in concealed variety, the patient is having an aberrant pathway, but it is not evident in the ECG, or it is not evident. So for this we need to perform electrophysiological study. And the other one is manifest WPW syndrome, where we will get features of WPW syndrome on ECG. Okay, now let's talk about the mechanism, how it occurs. So the impulse from atria goes to the ventricles through both the pathways, through the normal pathway as well as through the aberrant pathway. So now, if the impulse is traveling through the aberrant tract, there will not be any AV nodal delay. That's why we will get the PR interval will be very short. Okay. But we get a particular finding in the ECG of WPW syndrome, which are delta waves. Why there are delta waves? See, the conduction which is occurring through the aberrant pathway, it goes to the ventricles and then the impulse is conducted from myocyte to myocyte. The speed of this conduction is very less. If the impulse goes to the Purkinje fiber and normal pathway, the speed is very high. That's why we get a narrow QRS complex. But here initially, the impulse is going to the aberrant pathway, right? So at that time, in the normal pathway, there is AV nodal block and for 0.1 seconds. So till that time, we get a delta wave, which is narrow or slight upstroke in the QRS complex. But as this as the impulse in the normal pathway overtakes the impulse from the aberrant pathway, then we can get a normal morphology QRS complex after that. So, but in the initial period when there is AV nodal delay happening, we get a delta wave initially. Okay. So I hope you understood the cause of delta waves. The cause of delta waves is due to impulse traveling via the aberrant pathway, right? So in WPW syndrome, we will get slightly wide QRS complex. Let me summarize the ECG findings of WPW syndrome. We will get very short PR interval. Then the upstroke of R wave will show a slight deflection, which is the delta wave. And then there will be catching up of the impulse from the normal pathway and we will get slightly wide QRS complex, right? And the most common location of this aberrant pathway is in the left side, is in the left free wall. Now WPW syndrome can give rise to two types of arrhythmia. One is AVRT and other is atrial fibrillation. AVRT is an important arrhythmia occurring due to WPW syndrome. Okay, and we will talk about AVRT in the next podcast. Okay, till then, stay tuned. Chalo, bye bye.